Hello friends, welcome to ENTRANCEADVISER.com. Today I am going to discuss about the menstrual cycle, which is a part of the human reproduction chapter 3. Before that, if you are new to this channel, please hit the bell icon and do subscribe to this channel and so that you get all the new notifications as we upload a new video. So let's begin. Menstrual cycle starts with the first day of the period and ends when the next period begins. Hormonal signals are sent back and forth between the brain and the ovaries, causing the changes to the sacs in the ovaries that contains eggs, that is the follicles in the uterus. And the first part of the cycle prepares an egg to be released from the ovary and builds the lining of the uterus. The second part of the cycle prepares the uterus and the body to accept a fertilized egg or to start the new cycle or the next cycle of the pregnancy does not happen. The menstrual cycle is more than just the period. In fact, the period is just the first phase of the cycle. The menstrual cycle is actually made up of two cycles that interact and overlap, one happening in the ovaries and one in the uterus. The brain, ovaries, and the uterus work together and communicate through the hormones, that is, the chemical signal sent through the blood from one part of the body to the another to keep the cycle going. So, the monthly changes or the monthly cycle of the changes in the ovaries and the lining of the uterus, endometrium, starting with the preparation of an egg for the fertilization. When the follicle of the prepared egg in the ovary breaks, it is released for the fertilization and ovulation occurs. Unless the pregnancy occurs, the cycle ends with the shedding of a part of the endometrium, which is called menstruation. Although it is actually the end of the physical cycle, the first day of the menstrual bleeding is designed as the day 1 of the menstrual cycle in the medical parlance. So it is a definition of the menstrual cycle. So as you know, a menstrual cycle starts with the first day of the period and ends with the start of the next period. An entire menstrual cycle usually lasts between 24 and 38 days. But the length may vary from cycle to cycle and may also change over the years. The cycle length changes between the menarche when the period first starts during the puberty and the menopause when it stops permanently. So as you can see, it begins in the 9 to 14 years of age. It continues during these years and it stops during the 45 to 55 years. This phase is called menarche and this phase is called menopause, and it is a shading of the uterine endometrium as you can see from this animation. Okay. So understanding the menstrual cycle is important because it can give the body from head to toe. Some people notice changes in their hair, skin, croup, chronic disease symptoms, mental health, migraine headaches, or the way they experience sex at different points in the menstrual cycle. It's also the body's way of preparing for pregnancy over and over again. So people having penis in the vagina sex, the kind of sex you can become pregnant from, may want to pay attention to the menstrual cycle. Hormonal methods of birth control prevent some or all of the steps in the cycle from the happening, which keeps the pregnancy from occurring. So everyone, adolescent boys or girls who is about to enter their puberty, the process of the body changes that causes a child body to become an adult body capable of reproduction, should be taught to know the basic medical definition of menstruation, that is normal process of the females that undergo as the body prepare themselves for the potential pregnancy. It is a part of the monthly menstrual cycle that occur in the female reproductive system that makes the pregnancy possible. So, medically, menstruation, also termed as a period or bleeding, as we know in the regular or day-to-day life, is a process in a woman of discharging through the vagina blood or the other materials from the lining of the uterus as at about 1 monthly interval from the puberty until the menopause, ceasing of the regular menstrual cycles, except during the pregnancy. This discharging process lasts about 3 to 5 days only. So you may have some questions. I am giving answers to this. What FAQs you have and What are the signs and the symptoms of menstruation? You must have some questions like this. Besides the bleeding, other signs and symptoms of the menstruation may include headache, ache, acne, and the bloating, pains in the lower abdomen, tiredness, mood changes, food cravings, breast soreness, and diarrhea. And when does menstruation begin, and when does it end? And I also said that menstruation is a cycle, is a hormonal driven cycle. So day 1 is the first day of your period bleeding, while the day 14 is the approximate day where you ovulate. This is the ovulation phase. And if the egg is not fertilized, the hormone levels eventually drop at about day 25. The egg begins to dissolve and the cycle begins again with a period at about the day 30. And the menstruation begins at day 1 and normally ends in the day 3 to 5 days of the menstrual cycle. And at what age do the girls to go through puberty and start their period, begin to menstruate? The average age of a girl to get her first period in the US is 12, but range of age is about 8 to 15 years old. Women usually have periods until about ages of 45 to 55. Okay. At what age do the girls to their and how long does the period start? The menstrual cycle is a hormonal driven cycle, as I said, and so as the more periods vary somewhat, the flow may be light and moderate or heavy and can vary in length from about 2 to 7 days. With the age, the cycle usually shortens and becomes more regular. Now coming to the phases, which is most important. And in short, the phases of the menstrual cycle or the menstrual phase, it lasts 1 to 4 days, and it's the time where the menstruation occurs. And then comes the follicular phase, 5 to 13 days, when the follicle matures and the endometrium develops again. And then the day 14, ovulation day. Here the ovary releases an egg, and in the luteal phase, day 15 to 28, the follicle becomes a corpus luteum and endometrium prepares for an egg. So from this chart or this diagram, we can clearly see that two levels, one is estrogen and one is progesterone, and another two hormones, one is luteinizing hormone and another is follicle stimulating hormone, takes part, which regulates the entire system of this cycle, of this physiological cycle. And here you can see this menses occurs in the follicular phase, then after 14 days of the ovulation, after 28 days it occurs. And this is the diagram which shows us that the endometrium lining when takes place when premenstrual stage, and in the menstrual state it fades off and it becomes empty, and postmenstrual it again the egg passes through, and again this cycle continues. And during this period the progesterone remains this, and the endometrial layer is not there, and estrogen level is this. I'm coming to this part by part. First of all, an overview. See, I'm trying to understand you as much as I can. So, the menstruation. This is the period, the shedding of the uterine lining, the levels of the estrogen and progesterone are low. In the follicular phase, the time between the day of the first period of the period and the ovulation, the estrogen rises as an egg prepares to be released. The proliferative phase, after the period, the uterine lining builds back up again. The ovulation, the release of an egg from the ovary, the mid-cycle, the estrogen peaks just beforehand and then drops shortly afterwards. The luteal phase, here the time between the ovulation and before the start of the menstruation when the body prepares for a possible pregnancy. Progesterone is produced, peaks and then drops. The secretory phase, the uterine lining produces chemicals that will either help support an early pregnancy or will prepare the lining to break down and shed if the pregnancy does not occur. So as you can see that the menstrual cycle is divided into two parts. The first part of the cycle is the proliferative and then is the secretory phase. And as I said, two cycles occur side by side or simultaneously during this period, and one occurs in the uterus known as uterine cycle, and one occurs in the ovary known as ovarian cycle. In the ovary, these processes are going on, and these are the levels of hormones. I am coming to this. And in the uterus, this is the period, and then the proliferative stage, then the ovulation occurs. This is the uh, symbol showing egg is released, just like ovulation. What is ovulation? You know, the release of an egg from the uh, ovary as a from the primary follicle stage, and the secretory phase is this one. So let's discuss all this in very much detail. So in the summary, I can say the division, the types. This is a cycle. This is ovarian cycle and uterine cycle. I just said this, and the division is a follicular phase and luteal phase, and the cycle is, this is a pre-ovulation before the ovulation, and this is the post-ovulation stages. And in the follicular phase, the period and the proliferative phase occurs, and then in the luteal phase, the secretion occurs. This is also known as secretory phase. And in the uterus, all this occurs, and in the ovary, all this occurs. And then the first part of the cycle in the uterus, menstruation, that is the menstrual phase. When this occurs, from the time of the bleeding starts to the time it ends. And what is the significance? Old blood and the tissue from inside the uterus is sent to the vagina. So each menstrual cycle starts with the menstruation, the period. A period is a normal shedding of the blood and the endometrium, that is the lining of the uterus. The period is um, of the uterus and normal shedding of the blood through the cervix and the vagina. A normal period may last up to 8 days, but on average lasts about 5 to 6 days. So here it is written clearly that in a 28 days menstrual cycle, the menses takes place on the cycles of day 3 to 5. The production of luteinizing hormone from the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland is reduced here. Okay? And the withdrawal of this hormone causes the degeneration of the corpus luteum, and therefore progesterone production is reduced. And the production of estrogen is also reduced in this phase. And the endometrium of the uterus breaks down and the menstruation begins. The cells of the endometrium secretion bloods, and unfertilized ovum continues as the menstrual flow. So I understood. I believe that you got understood. And this is a menstruation phase. And coming to the next, the follicular phase. What is it? When does it occur? From the start of the period until the ovulation is held. And what is the significance? And signals from the brain tells the ovaries to prepare an egg that will be released. So during the period, the pituitary gland, a small area at the base of the brain that makes the hormones, produce the hormone called the follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, tells the ovaries to prepare an egg for the ovulation. The release of an egg from the ovary. Throughout the menstrual cycle, there are multiple follicles. As you can see, the maturation of multiple follicles or fluid-filled sacs containing the eggs, in which in each ovary at different stages of the development occurs. About halfway through the follicular phase, just as the period is ending, one of the ovaries is the largest of all the follicles at about 1 centimeter. ठीक है? This follicle becomes the dominant follicle and is one prepared to be released at ovulation. The dominant follicle produces estrogen as it grows, which peaks just before the ovulation happens, and more all this. And for most people, the follicular phase lasts at 10 to 22 days, but this can vary from cycle to cycle. So in the follicular phase, this is a summary. Just I've understood you. I made you understand. And this phase usually occurs during 6 to 13 days or the 14 days, 28 days in the cycle. The follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, secreted by the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland stimulates the ovarian follicle to secrete estrogens. The estrogen stimulates and the proliferation of the endometrium of the uterine wall. The endometrium becomes thicker by rapid cell multiplication and is accompanied by an increase in uterine glands and blood vessels. So the proliferative stage in the uterus, this is a proliferative phase, and in the uterus it occurs, and from the end of the period until the ovulation, and what? The uterus builds up by thick inner lining. While the ovaries are working and developing the egg containing the follicles, the uterus is responding to the estrogen produced by the follicles, rebuilding and rebuilding this and responding the lining that was just shed during the last period. This phase is called proliferative phase because the endometrium, the lining of the uterus, becomes thicker, and the endometrium is the thinnest during the period, and thickens throughout this period until the next ovulation occurs. The uterus does this to create a place where the potential fertilized egg can implant and grow. So the proliferative phase occurs from the end of the period until an ovulation, and what does their function? And the uterus builds up a thick inner lining, as I said. So next is the introduce, and that is the ovulation or ovulatory phase. Both LH and FSH attain a peak level in the middle of the cycle at about 14th day. The estrogen concentration in the blood increases. Rapid secretion of LH induces the rupturing of the Graafian follicle and thereby the release of the ovum. In fact, the LH causes the ovulation. So when does it occur? About the midway through the cycle. But this can change cycle to cycle. The ovulation divides the two phases of the ovarian cycle, that is the follicular phase and the luteal phase. And what does it occurs? What is the significance? An egg is released from the ovary and into the fallopian tube. The dominant follicle in the ovary produces more and more estrogen as it grows larger, and the dominant follicle reaches about 2 cm, 0.8 inch, but can be up to 3 cm. At its largest, right before the ovulation, when the estrogen levels are high enough, they signal to the brain, causing a dramatic increase in the luteinizing hormone, as I said, the LH, and this spike is what causes the ovulation, the release of egg from the ovary to occur. The ovulation usually happens about 13 to 15 days before the start of the next period. You got it? So in this is the same picture I am showing, and the estrogen levels are highest at the middle, at the ovulatory phase. As you can see, all the levels are increased, all the hormone levels are increased in this phase. Now coming to the second part of the cycle, the luteal phase is the ovary. It occurs in the ovary, and when does it occur? From the ovulation until the start of the next period. What does it significant? And the sac that is contained, the egg produces estrogen and progesterone. So in the luteal phase, it includes a cycle days about 15 to 28. The corpus luteum secretes the progesterone. Endometrium also thickens. The uterine glands become secretory. So once the ovulation occurs, the follicle that contains the egg transforms into something called the corpus luteum. This is called the corpus luteum, and begins to produce progesterone as well as the estrogen. And the progesterone levels peak about halfway through this phase. The normal changes, as you can see, this progesterone levels increase dramatically in this phase. The hormonal changes of the luteal phase are associated with common premenstrual symptoms that many people experience, such as mood changes, headaches, acne, bloating, and breast tenderness. If an egg is unfertilized, if an egg is fertilized, and then the progesterone of the corpus luteum supports the early pregnancy, and if there is no fertilization occurring, and then the corpus luteum will start to break down. As you can see, it started degenerating and started to break down between 9 and 11 days after the ovulation. This results in the drop in the estrogen level. The estrogen level falls, okay, and progesterone also level falls, which causes the menstruation to occur. The luteal phase typically lasts about 14 days, but between 9 and 16 days it's most common. Okay. So then the secretory phase occurs. This is not written in detail, but you can see this is the secretory phase when from the ovulation until the start of the next period occurs, and this occurs simultaneously along with the luteal phase in the uterus. But in the ovary, the luteal phase occurs. In the uterus, the secretory phase was observed. And the lining of the uterus releases or secretes the chemicals that will either help an early pregnancy attach if an egg was fertilized, or help the lining break and shed if no egg was fertilized. So during the secretory phase, the degeneration of corpus luteum takes place, and the endometrium prepares to either support a pregnancy or to break down for menstruation. The rising levels of the progesterone cause the endometrium to stop thickening and to start preparing for the potential attachment of the fertilized egg. The secretory phase gets its name because the endometrium is secreting and producing and releasing many types of chemical messengers. The most notable or noticeable of these messengers are the prostaglandins, which are secreted by the endometrial cells and cause the changes of the other cells to occur nearby. Two prostaglandins, in particular called the PGF2 alpha and PGE2, cause the uterine muscle to contract or cramp. The amounts of these prostaglandins rise after ovulation and reach their peak during the menstruation. The cramping caused by this prostaglandin helps to trigger the period. If a pregnancy occurs, the prostaglandin production is inhibited so that these contractions won't impact an early pregnancy. If the pregnancy does not occur, the corpus luteum stops producing estrogen and progesterone. The drop in the hormones along with the effects of the prostaglandins cause the blood vessels to constrict or tighten, the tissue of the endometrium to break down. So the menstruation begins and the whole cycle starts all over again. Okay. And tracking symptoms, I said throughout the menstrual cycle in Clue can help you feel more in control by helping with your notice patterns and anticipate changes. It can also help you identify if something is out in the norm from you and seek the advice of healthcare provider if needed. So this is a menstrual calendar or cycle. You can see 1 to 7 days uterine lining breaks down and menstruation occurs. This chart you can remember for your own benefit or can stick in the wall. This is a day menstrual cycle calendar. Now, hormonal control of the menstrual cycle. It's also known as mens. FSH stimulates the ovarian follicles to produce estrogens. The LH stimulates corpus luteum to secrete progesterone. Menstrual phase is caused by the increased production of the estrogens. As you can see, increased production of estrogens. Okay. LH causes ovulation. This is a summary just. I have said all this earlier. The proliferative phase is caused by the increased production of the estrogens. So the secretory phase is caused by the increased production of progesterone. This picture is showing that there is negative feedback occurs over most of the cycle, and the positive feedback occurs in the day 12 to 14 days. Okay. The same hormones that control the female puberty and the oogenesis also control the menstrual cycle. The estrogen, LH and FSH. The estrogen controls the secretion of the two pituitary hormones by acting on the hypothalamus, which controls the pituitary gland. When the estrogen level rises in the blood, it stimulates the pituitary via the hypothalamus to secrete more or less FSH and LH. In the negative feedback, you can see that the rising levels of the hormones feedback to the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland to decrease the production of the hormones. In the positive feedback, rising levels of the hormones feedback to increase the hormone production. During the most of the menstrual cycle, the estrogen and progesterone level provide negative feedback to the hypothalamus, to the pituitary gland and to the pituitary gland. This keeps their levels more or less constant. Okay. During the days 12 to 14, however, the estrogen provides the positive feedback to the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. This causes a rapid rise in the production of the estrogen by the ovaries and leads to the ovulation. Another hormone involved in the menstrual cycle is the progesterone. The word progesterone literally means progestational hormone. The progesterone is a hormone that promotes the gestation or the carrying of a fetus, or you can say the fetus of the progesterone in the menstrual cycle is to maintain the endometrium of the uterus. This endometrium lining is for maintenance, the progesterone is needed. Okay. The changes in the levels of all these four hormones and occur, that is the estrogen, FSH, LH, and progesterone occur during the menstrual cycle. After the menstruation occurs, the estrogen secreted by the ovaries increases. Okay, this causes the endometrium of the uterus to thicken. The FSH from the pituitary stimulates follicles in the ovaries to mature. The maturing follicles produce estrogen, and the level of estrogen in the blood also rises. When the estrogen reaches a high level in the blood, it stimulates the pituitary gland to release a surge of the LH, that is the luteinizing hormone. The spike in the LH stimulates that one remaining mature follicle to burst open and to release its oocyte, that is known as ovulation. During the first half of the cycle, the negative feedback keeps levels of the FSH and LH, estrogen, and the progesterone level relatively stable. But during the ovulation, the positive feedback causes a burst of the FSH and LH and the estrogen. So during the second half of the cycle, the progesterone rises as the corpus luteum in the ovary, okay, in the ovary matures and produces this hormone. This negative feedback helps keep levels of the other three hormones fairly constant. You got my point, okay? After the oocyte is released, the LH stimulates the mature follicle to develop into a corpus luteum. This corpus luteum then starts secreting the progesterone, which maintains the endometrium of the uterus. What happens next depends on whether the egg has been fertilized or not. If the egg has been fertilized, it will soon start producing a hormone that helps maintain the corpus luteum. Okay? As a result, the corpus luteum will continue producing progesterone and maintain the endometrium. If the egg is not fertilized or has not been fertilized, the corpus luteum will degenerate and stop producing progesterone. Okay? Without progesterone, the endometrium will break down or detach from the uterus and pass out of the body during the menstruation. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like this video. Thank you. Take care and bye-bye. See you in my next video. Study hard.